Stewart, judging by your accent, you're of Scottish origins. How or why did you end up in a place like Ferryland?
Well, I came to Canada in 1952. Father was a minister, and of course the family all came over. I was about 11 years old, I guess, at the time. And we're up in Makovic for about 2 years, and then Cape Breton, Nova Scotia. I went to art school there, and came back to Connerbrook, and I was with Bowwaters for quite a while there. And coming over here was a bit of an accident, I guess. Myself and Jerry Squires came over, and he was trying to get the lighthouse out on the point there. And on the way over, I noticed this house was all boarded up. And I thought, my God, I wonder if there's any chance of getting that. And just by luck, it was. So this is where I ended up. That was about 14 years ago.
How did you meet Jerry?
In Bombay. He had a place down there, and I met him through another artist friend, actually, Roger Aldworth. And I went down to visit Jerry, and we became good friends, and we kind of buddying around like the Three Musketeers for a long time afterwards.
Have you found that your relationship with Jerry, both being artists, have you influenced each other, do you think, affected each other much?
I don't think so, because we both work sort of in the same way, and except for the fact that Jerry likes getting up at the crack of dawn and I like working late at night. But other than that, we work in a rather sort of similar fashion, although our images are quite different. And we don't really influence each other artistic-wise at all, as far as I can see. We're just good buddies.
What about constructive criticism? Do you sort of
that
offer
sometimes, yeah. Mention a few things, or do you ever say, how does that look to you? Or I'll say the same thing to him if he's down, and I'm not too sure of how it's looking to somebody else. But sometimes you get so involved in what you're doing, you can't really see it. And you get an outside opinion and say, does it look like it's coming along okay, or something like that? And that sort of thing, you know, as far as criticism goes.
You made reference to your training. Where did you get your artistic training?
I think it was last year at high school. I got a scholarship to go to the Nova Scotia College of Art. That was when it was separated from Dalhousie. Now it's part of Dalhousie, I understand. And I went there for a while. And then I went to Toronto. And I was working with Jerry Gladstone. He was a sculptor there. He was doing a piece for the Winnipeg Airport. And I was taking a welding course then, so that I was always interested in that, and for sculpture. And I thought if I took the course, then at least I'd be able to handle the medium a little bit better, because a lot of artists at the time were just sort of tacking things together without actually using welding, you know, as a really fluid medium. So while I was working with Jerry and going to trade school at the same time, I could pass on what I learned at the trade school to Jerry, and so we helped each other out really well. And that worked out actually quite good. It was for about a year and a half or something like that. I was in Toronto doing that. So then I came back to Newfoundland, and some couple of years after that, I think I started working with Bowwaters as a sort of staff artist or whatever, or a mascot or whatever the hell they were.
What kind of stuff did you do there with them?
I do paintings for visiting VIPs and things like that. And
portraits?
No, landscapes or any particular spot anyone particularly liked. I'd go out and do a painting, and then I did a lot of stuff for brochures and that, and safety posters and that sort of thing. And it was a great situation, actually. I had a nice studio, all the materials I wanted, and I could get doing my own private work as well. And that went on for about 6 years, I think it was. Then I left it. It was almost, it would spoil you, really. So I went on my own then, and somehow or other I've managed to stay alive and keep myself going, just doing my own work.
You're both a sculptor and a painter. Did you have a preference, one for the other?
Yes, I like doing sculpture the best, but it's a very expensive thing to do. And I enjoy painting. Painting is very relaxing for me, but sculpture, about the best way to handle sculpture, it seems like if you get a large commission, the materials and things left over, you can put together your own smaller works like that. But I've tried a couple of times to do the small work just on my own, and the expense is just too high. So big jobs cover the small ones.
Yeah.
That works out all right.
And speaking of big jobs, I guess the sculpture of yours now that will be getting a lot of attention is the Ocean Ranger commission, the Ocean Ranger Memorial. How did that come about? How did you get that commission?
Fred Hand is a landscape engineer on the project. He gave me a call one day and mentioned it to me if I'd like to come up with a few ideas. So I came up with about half a dozen different designs, and they'd already had some other proposals. So the family's foundation were the final arbiters, you might say, of choice. So they narrowed it down to two designs, the anchor shape that's there and a cairn shape, which would have worked quite nicely too. And they decided on the anchor shape. And took quite a while of negotiations before things finally got off the ground, but once it got going, I'd already done it in my mind that many times. It was pretty straightforward after I had all my materials and everything together.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a lot of heavy work. That's one thing about sculpture as opposed to painting. The sheer labour involved before you actually see anything being done. It's just basically a construction job for a long time before it starts coming together and getting into the creative aspect.
The welding,
cutting, welding, cutting, lifting, moving things around. You know, every sheet I think was around 460 pounds or something like that.
What kind of material is it?
It was 3/8 aluminum. It was around between 400 and 500 pounds a sheet, and there was 14 sheets to use. So it was a good exercise.
It must have kind of a special feeling knowing that the families of the victims were involved in choosing the design.
Yes, and they were all very pleased with it. I met a lot of them at the opening when they had the unveiling, and we came from all over the place, England, States, Europe, you know, Newfoundland, and I was delighted that they were pleased with it, because that was the main thing. It's, you know, it's their monument, and they were all happy with it, so that made it for me.
Did you find that they were asking you, you know, what the shapes meant and what you were trying to get across with your design and so on?
No, actually, I think they mostly had decided on that themselves. I think that's why they chose this design rather than the cairn. The cairn, he said, was a bit too morbid or such, whereas the anchor represented stability or permanence, and that which was not exactly what I had in mind when I was doing it, but when I thought of what they said afterwards, that's what it would represent under the circumstances, and in that sense it was a really good choice, you know, because stability and permanence is what they're hoping for, I guess. Mm-hmm. So it worked out really well that way, and the scale worked out really well. When I was doing it in the site where I was building it, it looked really enormous, but once I got it up on the spot and saw, you know, how it fitted in, it suddenly came down and, you know, it looked right, mm-hmm. instead of looking so huge as it did when in the studio.
Now, you said that it's based on the idea of an anchor, or the form of an anchor.
Yeah, I was doing a lot of drawings down Cape Cod a few summers ago, and I went to a Coast Guard station down there, and they had some old naval anchors from some of the old warships, I guess World War II. And some of these anchors were enormous things, were bigger than the sculpture. And I was really impressed. They looked like pieces of sculpture just in their own right. So I did a lot of drawings and small models and that based on them. And from that, that's where the original idea for the anchor shape came from. It was these drawings I did in Cape Cod.
Now, the individual pieces that compose the total shape, are they based on objects other than an anchor, or is it?
No, this was sort of fragmenting the anchor shape. Certain parts that came out this way I sort of detached and used them to join the two sections together. Excuse me. And so it's all basically the shapes from the anchor, but I've isolated some, altered them a little bit, and sort of reassembled it so that it had these two large vertical masses with the blocks in between supporting them.
There's one of the smaller blocks in between that strikes me as being coffin-shaped. I don't know if that's intended or if that's maybe just me.
No, that's just one of those things that sometimes you can do a painting and you'll suddenly get a shape or a face in it that you don't intend at all. And that happened a few times in different projects. There was one sculpture where it was a shape of a horse's head in it. It wasn't intended, and what a hell of a job I had to try and get that out of it. And everything I did, it still ended up looking like a horse's head. Eventually I took the whole bloody thing out and changed it drastically. But some of those shapes sort of worked them their way in there, and you have to spot them and try and get rid of it then.
Working on a sculpture like that, knowing why you're doing it, that it's a memorial, does that influence the way you work at all, or what's in your mind as you're working?
No, not really. It's just the work itself. No, as to where it's actually going or how it will end up, that doesn't really come into it at all. It's just the sculpture as such. So that it's probably the way it should be, actually, because if you were too much interested or too much concerned with the end result as to where it was going or whatever, you might have a tendency to try and be a little bit too literal or too histrionic or something about it. So it's best to just keep it as a sculpture and concentrate on that.
Are you happy with the location of it?
Yeah, I think the location really worked out well. It's not the one that they were hoping for originally. They were hoping to be either up in Signal Hill or out in Cape Spear someplace. But no, that location is really good because you're still looking out to sea when you approach the sculpture, and you've got the whole city as a backdrop and the south side hills and that. So I think the location's actually pretty good. I was surprised that they managed to get it looking as good as they did. Because the landscaping and everything else around it is really nice. And once those trees grow up a bit, right now it just looks like shrubbery, but when they start reaching maturity, it should be really a nice spot. But that'll be a few years down the road yet.
Most art in Newfoundland, I think it's fair to say, is representative. Do you feel like a bit of an outsider?
I suppose in a sense, but it's not really as abstract as you might think, because it does tie in with reality and the landscape, and that it's not non-objective. You could put it that way, I guess. It's just abstracted slightly from reality. You can usually see some tie-in with it, and I'm not really the only one that's handling things that way. Actually, Frank Lapointe is pretty well doing abstract type work too. But as you say, though, it's true, most of the artists around seem to be doing more realistic stuff, which is okay, but personally, I find I can't really work that way. I like to take it in a much more broader sense, rather than just a detail. But it varies from artist to artist. Some artists prefer working that way, some like going into extreme realism, and I guess for every artist, well, they have their own way of doing it, and this is the way I like working, so I guess that's it.
Is it because it's more challenging to the viewer, or does that have anything to do with it? Or?
No, I think it's just your way of, your means of expression, I guess. I would get bored doing things too realistic or too literal. I find this way is more, you can suggest rather than explain or define. And I like the form of suggestion rather than clarification. But it gives the viewer a bit more space to work within. If you follow me.
The landscapes I've seen of yours that are kind of kind of realistic landscapes have all been quite small. Why is that?
Those the small, more realistic ones, they're fun for me. I enjoy doing them, and they give me a background of notes and colours and such. And I usually, when I take the paint box along, it's usually, sometimes I'm going out deliberately sketching, other times I'm just going out trouting or up the country, as you say, and I'll take that along. If I see something I like, I'll do a small sketch of it in colour at the time. And later on, I might use that or the memory of the thing to do a more subjective sort of interpretation of it. But the small, realistic landscapes, they're like a taxi driver's holiday, going for a drive. They're fun, you know, and I like to do them out on the spot, and they're still, as paintings I like them, but they're not, you might say, as serious as the other ones. They don't require as much concentration. They're just notes on the spot, and I like them actually, and they're a lot of fun to do, and I do them all the time. It's just one of those things that some artists carry along a small sketchbook and do drawings everywhere they go. So I usually do these small coloured notes.
I get the impression that the natural environment is very important to you. Is it where most of your ideas come from?
Yeah, it's your surroundings. Hopefully now soon I will be starting a series on cliff faces. I've always wanted to do that and just slowly getting into it now. And there was a photographer friend, Jeremy Jones from Toronto, was down. He was supposed to do some photography for Breakwater Books on the Pope's visit, and for some reason he couldn't get a press pass or whatever, and so he came down and gave Jerry Squires and myself and doing photographs of stuff we wanted for reference. So I got a lot of cliff faces all around this area here, and hopefully later on, now within the next few months, I can get into doing this sort of thing, because the colour, the texture, you know, as it gets close to the water, you get all these acid greens and kelp colours in that, and all these beautiful greys and such that I find that everything in the landscape is basically what I draw from, even from the sculpture. The shapes, the sculpture shapes are based either on parts of boats or rocks or natural formations, that sort of thing. Some of the small maquettes I have inside are based on, if I went out to Trans-Canada there near Holyrood or across the Witless Bay line, you'll get these rock formations piled atop each other and sort of standing out by themselves. They're just sort of natural sculptures. So I've sort of stylized them a bit, made them a bit more geometric, and I use that as a basis to go on. And like this one here now, this is based on servo shapes, partly anchor and partly a propeller shape. The Sasamol propellers here on the wharf down St. John's, and gave me an idea for this one. So I take everything that's in the environment. It's basically either the landscape or stuff washed up by the sea. I go along the beach and I'll find all sorts of weird odds names from God knows what they originally were, but they're interesting shapes, so I'll use those for a basis to go on.
And do you find that the local area here around Ferryland is very rich in terms of what it provides for you?
Yeah, it's really good. Not just Ferryland, but I go further afield, you know, down to Cappahayden that way. Not so much towards St. John's. I find the bleakness, like heading towards Trebassy, St. Shotts, those areas, you can get this real stark, very elemental sort of landscape, which is strange because I love the landscape around Connerbrook with the mountains and the trees and everything. But I find that the harshness or the starkness here seems to appeal to me more. A gloomy sort of nature. But
the Scottish Highlands, maybe.
I suppose, yeah. But it works for me anyway, so that's the main thing. Yeah, so it's very stark. It's stripped of all the frills, you might say. It's just the basic landscape. And you have the gulls and the islands and such. Yeah, for the kind of work that I'm interested in doing, I find this is a really good spot. I think if I was in a city, I don't know what to do. I tried painting in St. John's for a while, but I ended up, although while living in the city, I was painting what I remembered from being here. So it was just a change of location, but everything else remained the same.
Do you paint from memory?
Sometimes, yeah. The more serious works, the landscape is sort of like a visual version, I guess you might say, of Japanese haiku poetry. It's just taking the essence of it. They take the memory and from being out in the field, and it's the type of painting. It's just a couple of gestures will capture the essence of what it was I felt about the place, and then I'll finish it. Sort of like putting a patina on a piece of ceramic or a sculpture or something like that. I'll just use white starting off, and a couple of strokes, and I'll have the essence of what I wanted out of the landscape. And when that's dry, then I will start to colour it and rub the paint off rather than putting it on, so that it is a bit more like doing something with ceramics. And this way you just sort of get the impression of the place without any clarification of detail, or you couldn't say this is such and such a place. It's just, yeah, I think I know where you were, that sort of thing, or to get the feeling out of it without actually being clear-cut.
So you try to capture the feeling that...
I don't know for a second, right?
You recently did a series, I think, based on whale bones. So, and do you like to work in series like that, or do a series?
I always do, actually. Rather than just do like an individual painting here and there, I like to have a series and tie it all together, and take an idea and see how far I can carry it, and then it sort of automatically sort of runs out. You realise that, okay, I've done as much with this subject as I can, but at least it makes the series coherent and it all sort of ties together. Actually, except maybe for sculpture, I find the paintings have a tendency to go in series. I suppose in sculpture in a sense, but it's a little bit more, the pieces are more individual than paintings, probably because of the difficulty of the medium, I guess.
I suppose just the expense factor with sculpture.
The expense factor is a big number there. I'm supposed to have a show coming up with Jerry Squires at the Pollyanna Galleries sometime around November, I think, where I'll have some small sculpture, tabletop size, you know, this size. And that's not too bad. I can usually manage that. But anything larger, say like for out in the yard or anything like that, to do something 5 feet tall, it costs about as much as to do something 10 feet tall. So it doesn't. If you're going to do anything that big, you might as well, you know, go all the way. But for tabletop, coffee table size sculpture, but any kind of half decent luck, I should be able to have it all ready in time for the show. Keep your fingers crossed.
And you're working in metals again?
Metal, and some of the sculpture in this particular instance is going to be wood with an acrylic and sand finish. I'll use the sand on the beach here mixed in with the acrylic, which will give a very hard, it will look like sandblasted metal, the sort of overall finish. That's because basically you can't really get good wood around here that you could use the grain or the natural patterns of the wood, so I'll have to use whatever wood is dry enough, because even some of the so-called dry wood you buy here, if you drive a nail into it, you'll get water coming back hitting you in the eyes. So kiln dried wood you'd have to get from Toronto or someplace like that. There's nothing in Newfoundland that's really actually dry, so you have to use old wood, and some of the old wood you get you have to sort of make do.
How do you find it being an artist living in a small community like this? Do you get your neighbours coming in wondering what you do and what it's all about?
Most everyone around knows what I'm doing, which is surprising, but even the more abstract work they can usually tell. But actually, I think they understand more around here sometimes than what happens in a gallery when you're in town. I guess they're just so used to it now, seeing what I do all the time. And with the welding and that, it was becoming for a while something like the village smithy, you know, repairing stuff, cars, chrome sets, whatever, and fixing kids' bicycles, you know, all that. The old barter system as usual. But
I guess you established yourself pretty well here. You've recently had to build your own house.
Yeah, that I'd never built a house before, so I found a book up to the old classic bookshop there in the Avalon Mall, and had a few designs for log houses. So we don't have any logs around here big enough. I noticed there was a lot of telephone poles being taken down, and so I inquired into it, and I got them from the Light and Power Company. So with about 40 telephone poles and a chainsaw and a hammer and axe, bingo, I had a house in about 3 months. Probably for less than most people pay for a down payment on a new one, but it works. And it's warm and comfortable, so that's the main thing.
Well, Stewart, thanks very much for talking to us today.
You're welcome.